The 76ers just got some bad news that just might be the worst news they've received all season long in what has been an absolute disaster of a year for the 76ers. Apparently, the Sixers cannot trade for their first round pick back from the Oklahoma City Thunder. According to a recent report, we talked about the possibility of the Sixers getting this pick back from the Thunder recently on the show, but that is no longer in the cards for Philadelphia. So we're going to talk about what that means for the Sixers and their season moving forward. Appreciate you tuning in to today's show on 76ers Now. But before we dive into talking about this unfortunate turn of events for the Sixers, I want to give you guys a little heads up. If you missed yesterday's show here on the channel, we talked keep or trade. Which players could the 76ers keep on the roster? Which guys could they see getting shipped out at this year's NBA trade deadline on February 6th if they do decide to be sellers? Talked about Kelly Oubre, Gershon Yabusele, Caleb Martin, and a whole lot more. So if you missed that video, a lot of trade talk in that video from yesterday, go ahead. It's on the channel right now. And the link to that will be in the description as well of this show. So go ahead and check that video from yesterday out. So this unfortunate report coming from Mike O'Connor, who is a writer for the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast covering the 76ers, took to Twitter on January 21st, so yesterday as of this recording, and said this: I've been informed that it is not possible to trade with the Thunder to reacquire or amend the protections on this pick. That is the pick the Sixers have top 6 protected that Oklahoma City currently owns. This is because other pick swaps were later traded that could be affected by what happens with this pick. So the pick will either land in the top 6 or it will be OKC's at that point. It is not possible to make trades involving that pick this season. And this is brutal news for the Sixers because they really need to have something to show for this disastrous season. And landing that pick potentially at the top of the draft would have been what they could have justified having such a bad season for. But now where that pick lands and if they keep the pick is pretty much out of their control. It's all in the hands of the NBA and how the NBA lottery balls might fall come the NBA draft. And Mike O'Connor expanded a little bit on why this is not a possibility anymore for the 76ers. From what I was told, there's absolutely no way to make any trade involving that pick until it is conveyed. Basically, let's say it lands at number 7 after the lottery. At that point, OKC has full ownership of the pick, and then you can trade for it. Although, who knows if and why OKC would actually want to do that, given they have the 7th overall pick in the draft. But until that pick is settled, it cannot be traded. Absolutely brutal. So what does this mean now for the 76ers moving forward? Well, what it means is they only get to keep this pick if it lands in the top 6, right? Protected 1 through 6 means if it lands between 1 and 6, Philadelphia keeps it. If it's 7 through 30 in the first round, it goes to OKC. But even if the Sixers, who currently sit at number 8 in the lottery odds among all NBA teams, even if they do finish in the bottom 6 in the standings, there is no guarantee that they keep the pick again because the NBA's draft order is determined by a lottery and lottery balls. So there's no confirming. Just if they finish in the bottom 6, they get that top 6 pick. And I want to show you this graphic I found, this photo I found on Twitter. Shout out to Derek Bodner on X for sharing this and bringing this to light for 76ers fans to see. This is the odds the 76ers keep their first round pick based on where they fall in the standings. So right now the Sixers are 8th in the standings. If you look around the middle of this graph, that means the Sixers would only have about a 25% chance to keep the pick. That cannot happen for the Sixers. You cannot finish 8th, miss the playoffs, and then still not have a good chance to keep that pick, because if you are that bad all season and you lose the pick to OKC, have nothing to show for this bad season, it's just another waste of a year here in Philadelphia. And you can see the only way they have a 100% chance of keeping that pick is if they are the worst or second worst teams in the NBA. And even if they do jump up from 8th to 6th in the NBA standings and the NBA lottery odds, they still only have about a 46% chance to keep that pick. So basically 50-50 whether or not the Sixers would actually be able to keep that pick. And Is it even possible for them to jump that high in the standings given where they're at right now and where the teams ahead of them are? You take a look at the current NBA lottery odds. This is as of Wednesday, January 22nd, before any games are played. Sixers are sitting at 15-27, coming off that awful loss to the Denver Nuggets, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But just a half game back of the Blazers in terms of, worst teams in the league, who are currently number 7 at 15-28. But I mean, to get into that top 6, you got to catch up to the Brooklyn Nets, who are 14-30 and obviously actively tanking. Hornets, Pelicans, Raptors, Jazz, Wizards round out that top 5. So if the Sixers do decide to tank, right, and keep sitting Joel Embiid, with his injuries, and sit Paul George here and there and try to actively lose games, will they even have a realistic shot at finishing in the top 6 to even guarantee themselves a 50-50 chance at keeping the pick? It doesn't look great because, again, all these teams that are ahead of them, outside of the Pelicans really, who have been better as of late, are really actively trying to lose, actively trying to tank to increase their draft positioning in what's supposed to be a very, very good draft with the likes of Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey at the top of this draft. So look, it puts the Sixers in a very, very tough position, and Daryl Morey is going to have a really big decision to make, right? If the Sixers were able to trade for that pick theoretically, you could still at least try to compete a little bit, knowing that no matter what, you still have a pick in the draft, and even if you do lose games, no matter where it lands, you get to keep that pick. And hey, if you do tank, great, that means you have better odds to land a higher pick, but there's no threat of you losing the pick. Now, man, there's a serious threat and a serious chance that they do not get to keep that pick. So how does this impact Daryl Morey's decision-making ahead of the trade deadline? They can still try to tank and try to increase their odds in the lottery to try and get the best chance possible to keep that pick. But again, I want to keep harking on this because this is so important. There's obviously a chance that they tank and do all this losing and have nothing to show for it if the pick falls or if they don't jump high enough and the pick goes to OKC and all of a sudden you lost all these games. You didn't try to make a push to win and make the playoffs, and now you don't have a pick. The other option for Daryl Morey here at the deadline is to try to make some win-now moves to get into that play-in at the very least. Right now, you're only about 3 games behind the Chicago Bulls for the 10 seed, but anything beyond that, going to be really tough for the Sixers to rise too far in the standings unless Joel Embiid comes back and this team can play at a full capacity, play fully healthy, and win some games. But the way the season has been going, I don't know why you feel so optimistic that that's really in the cards for the 76ers. When they're out there on the floor, man, fully healthy or not, they just have not shown an ability to beat good teams, and even playing bad teams, they tend to play down to their competition, and it has just not been the season we expected from the 76ers. So, again, more huge decision now. What do you do now that you know this pick really is out of your control? It's out of your hands where you ultimately end up in the draft. And Joel Embiid set to be really evaluated soon. He's missed, say, the last 10 games or so dealing with this foot injury, and he's supposed to be reevaluated now in the coming days as the team returns from Denver and gets ready to play Cleveland on Friday. I think what they decide to do with Embiid here will really tell us what direction this team wants to head in. If they reevaluate Embiid, deem him healthy enough to play, and get him back out there on the court, that tells me Daryl Morey and the squad is looking to win some games and try to make a push for the playoffs so that they at least can say, we made the playoffs, we made at least a play-in, and we tried to compete and try to make a chance to make something out of this season. But if they come out and say Embiid's going to be out for another week, another 2 weeks, or however long, that tells me Daryl Morey has decided to start the tank job, and they are trying to do their best to keep the pick. But again, that's so risky because they're not going to be the worst or second worst record in the league. And if they're not, there's a pretty high possibility that pick does fall, and they have nothing to show for a horrific, disappointing, terrible season. And moving on from, this pick talk, can this team even win games if they do decide to make a push for the playoffs? Look, I'll say this. The effort we've been seeing from this team, especially over this recent losing streak, is an absolute joke. It's a disgrace to the fans, and it's a disgrace to the game of basketball, really, especially this game, Tuesday night against Denver. If you are watching this game and you subject yourself to watching the Philadelphia 76ers right now, you saw a lack of effort, a lack of energy, a lack of will and want to from this team. I mean, playing this Denver Nuggets team. Yes, they're a very good team, led by Nikola Jokic. And obviously the Sixers are undermanned without their best player. But at the very least, you have to hustle. You have to give heart. You got to show that you want to be out there and you want to win games and you want to put a good product out there on the floor. And what I saw from the Sixers last night was a joke. Not getting back in transition all night long. The Nuggets, I believe at one point, had a 16-0 run, transition points alone early in that game. The Sixers, even on made baskets, weren't getting back and guarding their man and matching up. It was an absolute joke from really everybody on this team. And Paul George talked about it. We know it's not okay. We know it has to be better. Well, this is the way it's been for really multiple weeks now, ever since the calendar turned to 2025. Every player on this team is subject to this because there is no way that you are 40, 30 points worse than this Denver Nuggets team. A loss is a loss. I can live with a loss as long as you're showing effort. But what I saw in that game, it's just not going to cut it. And Nick Nurse is clearly frustrated with everything he's had to deal with this season between the injuries and the losing and just the pressure and the expectations they had coming into the year and where they are right now. I mean, look at my man Nurse. Look at my man Nurse. And a lot of people want to pile on Nick Nurse saying that he should be in the hot seat or he should get fired, this and that. He needs to do a better job. And I do agree. I think Nick Nurse does need to do a better job coaching this team. But man, he's dealt such a difficult hand. How many coaches would be winning games when they never know what players are going to be out there on the floor every given night and your best player is pretty much never out there? You know, he just seems tired of it. And the players themselves just seem checked out and not really buying into what Nick Nurse is trying to preach to them. And that should be at the very least playing hard and showing you care and showing that you want to win games. And so I don't blame Nick Nurse when he's looking like this in the post-game press conferences because he just doesn't know what to do at this point. It's just been an absolute disaster of a year for the 76ers. And they're really at a very pivotal point right now in the season. Knowing they can't get that pick back, the tank either has to be fully embraced and you just got to hope and pray that you can fall enough in the standings and that the lottery balls and the lottery odds fall in your favor and you get to keep that pick. Or you got to say right now, let's just go for it. Let's hope that we can get everybody back healthy and we can make a run. But one way or another, they're going to have to make this decision soon. And the players are going to have to, meet with Nurse and they're going to have to figure out a way if they do want to start winning games to get this thing back on track. Because the way they're playing right now, again, even if they tried to win games, I don't really think they're very much capable of doing so. So just brutal news for the Sixers that they cannot trade for this pick back. Going to really complicate things as we head towards a trade deadline, but we should find out pretty soon with the possible return of Joel Embiid, what the Sixers are going to want to do, what direction they're going to want to go in as we move forward here in this season. Well, the Sixers season on the floor has been a disaster, but you know who hasn't been a disaster? Jared McCain before that injury was absolutely balling out for this team. One of the few bright spots and few bright takeaways that you can have from this season, and hopefully he can come back healthy and as good as he was before that injury next season. But if you want to support the kid, Jared McCain, the rookie, the would have been rookie of the year if he didn't get hurt, Jared McCain jerseys are available now through our friends at Fanatics. Chatsports.com/McCain. Again, not a whole lot to be impressed with or to be happy about when it comes to this team, but I think we can all agree that Jared McCain is going to be an important piece of this team for the long haul. What better time to get in on it and get his jersey right now? Again, that's chatsports.com/McCain. We'll have that link hanging out for you in the comment section as well as the description of today's 76ers now. So you heard from me on this. I want to hear from you. Should the Sixers tank and try to keep that draft pick, or should they try to make a push for the playoffs? Get in the comment section. I'm going to be in the comment section as well, trying to respond to as many people as I can because this is a very in-depth conversation and a very controversial topic here for the 76ers, and I want to hear your voice because your voice is just as important as mine is here on the show. So let me know. Type T for tank, P for playoffs. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for nonstop coverage on the Sixers as we approach the NBA trade deadline. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, tuning in to today's show, and we'll see you next time here on 76ers Now.